Still preparing. We're almost there. You see the little thing on there, but it's got just a little bit of a delay. Okay, everything is good to go. Feel free to start the meeting.
Excellent. Good evening. I will call to order this meeting of the Water Wastewater Task Force for August 18th. The time is 6:34, and I will turn it over to Public Works Director Peter Fernandez, and we'll catch the roll inside of the presentation.
All right. Thank you, Councilor Nanke. Let me, oh yeah, that is my presentation. I just got to go back to the top. Here we are. All right, welcome everyone. What we have tonight is we'll do introductions. We'll do a quick reminder on conducting the task force meetings in the times of COVID. The topics for tonight is we're going to do a quick recap of last week, talk about, we had a couple of questions and we shared some information, so I want to make sure that all the task force members have access to it. We'll have our rate proposal, we'll have our biannual sampling of bills, and then talk about the schedule, and we'll do intros. So, Councilor Nanke?
I am here.
Yeah, and I think, so
Chair of the committee, Councilor for Ward 3.
Thank you. Just before we move to everyone else, so what we learned this week is only the audio is the official record, so it'll be important that all the members introduce themselves so that on an audio basis we have you. So Commissioner Brentano, are you with us? Not yet? Okay. Bruce? Oh, unmute.
Bruce Carnine, Suburban East Salem Water District.
Thank you. Councilor Hoy?
Chris Hoy, Salem City Council, Ward 6.
Councilor Kaiser?
Kara Kaiser, City Councilor for Ward 1.
Councilor Lewis?
Jim Lewis, City Councilor, Ward 8.
Ryan?
Hi, Ryan Mann, at-large member.
Chris? Was he, Chris, are you muted? We couldn't hear you. I still couldn't hear. Is Chris here? He is here, right?
I believe so.
I'm not the only one that couldn't hear him, right?
Correct.
Correct. He can also just press the space bar if he's having problems.
All right. Well, we know he's here. David?
David Sawyer, City Manager for the City of Turner.
Laura?
Laura Tesler, at large.
Jordan?
Jordan Truitt, representing the Salem Chamber of Commerce. Here.
Tim?
This is Tim Wood. I'm the Finance Director at the City of Kaiser.
All right. Commissioner Brentano, welcome. You can introduce yourself.
As soon as I get organized, yes. Sam Brentano, Marion County Commissioner.
All right. Terrific. Welcome all. Okay, so just, and before I leave this slide, I think what we're talking about is just so everybody understands, Councilor Kaiser was good enough to let us know that she has a 7:30, so that she has to bug out by 7:30. So I'm going to try and finish these slides. I don't see any reason why it can't be done by around 7, so it'll be a good half hour to have discussion, and that way Councilor Kaiser has plenty of time to participate. All right, so, and then also in introductions, I apologize. Again, I'm Peter Fernandez, the Public Works Director. I'd like Alicia Blaylock and Deb Ghilardi to introduce themselves, please.
Good evening, I'm Alicia Blaylock. I'm the Administration Division Manager in the Public Works Department.
Deb Ghilardi, Ghilardi Rostein Group. I'm the consultant.
All right, so welcome. And then we have other staffers that are listening in, and of course our guests are able to watch this on YouTube. All right, So you saw the slide before. I had a couple of things. We're on Zoom this time, YouTube for observers. Again, we're doing it on PowerPoint just to keep things organized, keep things moving along. Once again, I'll just pause periodically to make sure that we get questions, but people, members should feel free to jump in and ask questions, and we'll unmute, we'll unshare and and get to any questions. This is, we're much more interactive when we do this in our conference room. Once again, guest comments are only in writing. We did post the information that we sent you last week on our website. In the past, we've had people participate, citizens participate. We really haven't had a whole lot of participation. In the end, everyone will get a postcard, and folks will certainly be invited to participate at the council public hearing. And then I'm hoping for a recommendation tonight. However, there are more meetings scheduled if the members feel that they need more time to mull things over. All right, so from last week, you'll recognize one of our best looking customers. We set the stage. We described Salem's utility. We talked about the rate setting process, and these were some of the topics. These were all of the topics that we discussed. The PowerPoint slides, we sent you a PDF of the entire presentation, and the slides were also posted to the city's website for the public to view if they so choose. There were a couple of questions. Chris Sarles asked what the percent of utility revenue customers are by the percent of revenue by customer class. And we sent him an email with this information, and we just wanted to share that with everyone. And you can see from the table that, just under 60% of our revenues come from single-family residential. And then the next largest one is commercial at 16%, and multifamily at 15%, and then so on and so forth. So I just wanted to share that information so everyone could see it. And when you get these slides, the PDF of these slides tomorrow, you can have that for posterity. And then we had a follow-up question from David Sawyer, who was interested in having the data sliced a little bit more. So there you see, this is an expansion of the slide that I showed last week for customer growth by service. And so you see it there, and you see it by customer class as well. I will say that we had a blow in our data, and it was right in here. We had about 2,000 more multifamily accounts. I don't know what the error was that then made these numbers higher by 2,000. So that was a slight error that we had. All the other numbers are correct. And then in another slide, these numbers here, what the change of rate revenue actually is, regardless of what's adopted, these were in the wrong place, so they needed to be shifted over one. So I wanted to just kind of point those out to you. But otherwise, there's a whole lot of numbers here, but I want to share that with everyone. Any questions from last week?
It's Alicia.
Alicia,
that the numbers on the bottom line aren't showing on my screen.
Oh, they're not?
No.
Okay. Can others see them, the change in rate revenue?
Yes, I
I got
can.
them online, yeah.
Okay. Alicia, you need to buy yourself a bigger laptop.
Noted.
Any other questions from last week? Okay. And we will move on to the main event tonight, which is the rate proposal. And as I mentioned, we provided you with a written report on Friday, and it was important to us in the hopes of getting a recommendation today that you had the information ahead of time. And I always like to start these presentations. I've done this for many years now. I don't like to build up to it. I like to tell you what it is and then backfill the information. So here you have it. What we're recommending is a 3% revenue slope increase for water, 3% for wastewater, and 5% for stormwater. And the difference between the water and wastewater and stormwater is 2 years ago, we did a cost of service analysis update, and we identified that stormwater was not generating enough revenue to cover its expenses, which means it's being subsidized by the other two utilities. The task force, the cost of service policy advisory committee, the task force recommended to the council, and the council adopted 5% increases for 5 years. So we expect, even beyond this biennium, we expect another year of 5% rate increases for stormwater. So just a little bit about our rate proposal philosophy. You know, what really drives us, and we talked a little bit about this last week. And the first thing is right here, that planned rate increases are critical to proper financial planning. And this is important both for the utility as we plan for our operations, and we plan for our capital construction, which is substantial. But it's also important to our customers. And I'm going to show you a slide here coming up where for a long time before we entered this era of small planned rate increases, we would have a lot of spikes, and that would wreak havoc, not just in the utility, but also on our customers. So our approach has been just small annual increases, and it's really worked for us for a number of years now. We are very careful to properly manage our operating expenses and our capital investments. Obviously, we produce a budget for the council, for the budget committee and the council to review every year. That's thoroughly reviewed there. The capital improvement plan is reviewed every year, and that provides a 5-year plan for capital improvements, not just for the utility, but for the entire city. Consistent application of the cost of service model. There's no need to talk about that today. We will update the cost of service model 2 years from now, but just know that whatever rate proposal we have will flow through the cost of service model so that everybody's being billed consistent with that. All right. So I wanted to show you this little gem, and I kind of sliced it a little bit. We actually have data that dates back to 1980 in terms of rate proposals. We don't have any data in our files prior to 1980, but the boss who hired me, Frank Malden, wrote this book right after he retired. Unfortunately, Frank passed away last year, but he wrote this book, and he talks about how chaotic utility rates had been even prior to 1980, where sometimes the council would even reduce rates. And that would absolutely wreak havoc on the utility. So I just want to talk real briefly, and these are names that I just made up. So we have the erratic era, and you can see that in 1980 there was, a 14% rate increase for water and a 36% rate increase for sewer. Then in 82 there was a 68% increase, and then nothing until 85. And you can see how that would wreak havoc, especially if you're a large user, like an industrial user, how you'd never know what was coming. Then in the mid 90s, and this was really due primarily to Frank's leadership, we entered what I called the early revenue slope era. The utility embarked, prior to the early 90s, the utility embarked on master plans, infrastructure master plans. They were produced. They told us what improvements needed to be done. The utility was really well behind on improvements that needed to be done. The DEQ also came a-knocking. We used to spill sewage quite a bit during rain events. So a lot of work needed to be done. So we entered an era of the Water Wastewater Task Force was created in the early 90s. And we entered an era of very substantial rate increases. And you can see it here that there was a revenue slope, and you can see the substantial rate increases. There was also an era of a lot of borrowing. At some point, the utility was in debt to the tune of $300 million. And this level of rate increases were required to support that. That era kind of came to an end in 2010 when we wanted to start to propose, there was really rate increase exhaustion. The rates had increased dramatically, as you could see it. And then even the council was exhausted and adopted a zero in 1 year, as we then entered into this era that we have today, what I call the current revenue slope era of slow, steady rate increases. What you see here, these two sixes were because of this zero. Again, it's a zero-sum game, and we have to make these things up. But after that, we've had a very steady era, and we've even had times when, if our rate model showed that we could afford it, we've actually proposed less than 3%, and we've done that a couple of times. You see here, and of course you see out here with the start of the stormwater utility increases, just to get the COSA lined up. But we've actually had a very good run of slow, steady, predictable rate increases. So our rate proposal goals, we have a philosophy, and the goals, what we're looking for is a few things here. We want to maintain a 120-day operating reserve. And what that means is that we want to have enough cash to be able to operate for 120 days in the event that we couldn't bill a dime. And you can think of, in fact, we always talk about the big one, the earthquake coming, and we need the cash to be able to do stuff. But it doesn't have to be that dramatic. A few years ago, the Portland Water Bureau was updating their software, their billing software, and they ran into problems. They couldn't bill for 30, 40, 50 days. So there was no revenue coming in, and we're operating a business here. So really anything can happen to you. So having that reserve is very important. Also important as we borrow money, as we get our ratings, to show that we have cash on hand. We want to maintain our debt reserves and our debt ratios. So it's 1 year of debt service and a ratio of 1.25. We want to continue to, we talked about this last week, we want to continue to increase our capital transfers to meet that 1% of utility valuation, so $33.8 million. And then we want to maintain an unrestricted fund balance of $10 million. And there's no policy to that. That is really nothing more than your humble public works director really wanting to have extra cash available in the event of some dramatic emergency. So again, it's just running a business and having cash available in case of an emergency. That's money that typically would not be budgeted. So it would really sit there in case of a dramatic emergency, and the council would have to act. So those are the kinds of things that are our philosophies and our goals that are driving as we do our financial plan and really decide what we're going to recommend in terms of a rate proposal. So this table is what was in attachment A that we provided to you in the write-up late last week. So this table really provides a snapshot of the utility financial model. It shows what we propose. So this is really what we're looking at, and these are the numbers that we are most confident in. And then I always like to show, the next 5 years. This model, actually, if we were to show it to you, it goes on for thousands of rows, and Deb, is it hundreds or thousands of columns in an Excel table, and many, many worksheets to get you this. So this is really a summary, and it goes out for many more years, but it's important to kind of understand where we're headed. And we use this tool to think about the rate proposal, to think about decisions that we're making every day, or as we budget, and then every single day, and to kind of give us a sense of whatever we're going to do today, what does it mean in the future? So I just want to, as you kind of see the table, I just want to point out a couple of things, and I'll leave it up on the screen for a little while. So in row 1, you really see our philosophy at work. So this is really what we're plugging in as our current rate proposal, and into the future, what we're thinking about. So we're not plugging in any more or any less. We're just seeing how this works. In row 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, you see our philosophy of managing our expenses. And, you'll see like this number compared to the current year, this is like a 6% rate increase. Then you see like a 4, then 2s and 3s in here. And what's happening there is there are a number of things that we don't have control over. So things like PERS, so there's PERS hikes every other year that we have no control over. So we have to address them. There's medical expenses, health insurance expenses. The city of Salem is self-insured. We have actually have been doing a good job of managing those. So those have been tamped down quite a bit, but at any point they can spike up. And so we have to absorb those spikes as you see that. And then, electricity and chemicals and everything else that comes into play in our business. And then you see the rate funded. And of course, this is what we want to, our goal is always to get up to that $33 million number. Even out here, we're not quite getting to it, but we continue to apply more money. What's happening here? Well, we could raise rates higher and get to this number faster, but we've really made a commitment to keep this at a number. This isn't a philosophy, but this is certainly something that, we've kind of made the promise that we want to stick to this level here. So that's why this number, we continue to manage ourselves, we continue to pay down debt and increase this number, but it's sort of it's almost like this mythical $33 million that we're trying to get to. And then the last thing on this table, before I move on to the next one, is can everybody see this operating expense versus revenue ratio line? So what we're looking for here is anything over 100% is telling us that our model is showing that we're going to spend more than we collect in operating revenue. So now we have plenty of cash. And we, so we have, and we tend to, public budgeting. So we have to budget for everything, even though there is an 8% savings built in here. What our model is showing is that we're gonna overspend a little bit, and we're probably gonna overspend in the next 2 years. In the end, these things tend to correct themselves. So I tend to be more worried with this number out here. If we were showing a number too far below 100%, it would really start to indicate to us that we're overcharging, that we're proposing a rate that we're going to over collect. But in this area here, what it shows is, we're probably just about right. We could propose, what my consultant would tell me is, hey, propose 3.5, propose 3 3/4. At this point, we're okay, and there is time that when we get to the next biennium, if we're still in big trouble or we have to, start cutting, a lot of this capital transfers, then we'd have to think about it. What this tells me is, hey, over the next 2 budgets, we're going to really tighten up on, any new positions or any new programs. We're going to really, keep our belts nice and tight to make sure that, we don't start chewing into our money too badly here. So any questions on this table before I move on? It's sort of I'll show you the second half of the table.
Hey, Peter?
Yes.
In looking what was sent out when we look at that operating expense, and is that because of the differences in the previous slides it had on what was sent out 107.2% for the 2021 and yours shows 103.
We had a blow. And so this was the only one that was incorrect, and we fixed it. Yeah, I have that in my notes here to mention. So thank you.
Cool, thanks.
The other thing that we talked about mentioning is other revenue, non-operating in the 4th line down. You can see that includes the sale of the water rights to the city of Hillsborough, and that is finished in year 2022. So you see the drop from 3.5 to 0.7. And so that's something 2 years ago we talked about might result in the need for a different kind of a rate increase. But at this point, we're not modeling anything different.
Right. And Alicia, we might as well just talk about what this 0.7 represents. So go ahead.
It represents loan repayments for things that the utility fund has loaned to the general fund or the parking fund or another construction fund. So over time, loans have been made for the parking district meters, the street light conversion, and the improvements in the general fund next year at Civic Center.
Yeah. So I, I just want to be clear. Sometimes things show up in emails or things show up in the newspaper and they're misunderstood. So I just want to, this is a good time to just be clear real quick. So in fact, let me just move on to the next slide. There's a substantial amount of money in the utility fund that are reserves, and the bulk of these reserves are invested in the state local government investment pool, which pays a pittance. I mean, it's like, a passbook savings account. So when we loan money to other parts of the organization, it is highly regulated by the state. These loans have to be paid back in a specified amount of time. And the policy of the city is to charge a 0.5 point greater than what the local government investment pool is paying. So the other parts of the city get a great deal on the loan, and the utility actually makes more money. So it is truly a win-win situation for the city and for its funds as a whole. So I think that's always important to shine a light on and explain. All right, so then looking at the remainder of the table, these things usually are below it, but we wanted to make it bigger for everyone to see. So you can see here that this is what it costs to maintain the 120-day reserve. It doesn't cost, we just have to reserve the money, and as expenses go up over time, this goes up over time. This is our debt service reserve, and as we pay off our debt, you start to see here at the end in fiscal year 27 how we are, really we pay off the, I showed you kind of the 3 borrowings that we have, and the other 2 get paid off. So there's a lot of capacity here. Where we really aren't meeting, and again, this is really, the director's hope, the director's practice, is you can see that I like to see 10 million. Here we're in pretty good shape. Here we are in not very good shape. Some of this is we're applying more money. We're spending a little more than we're taking in. We're applying a lot more to capital. When we look out, in year 27, then we're super golden. So because we go back up, this is like a little tunnel that we've had to go through before. I wish we had more. We can work with our budgets to make this more. But I think we're still okay with what we're proposing. But it's just really something else that as we look at it, we say, boy, the 3%, the 3, 3, and 5 is well within what we should be recommending. And that's, maybe in 2 years we have to recommend a little more. For now, we're comfortable, and we'll see if we can work hard to make this a little better. And then in debt covered ratios, we've paid off our debt so much that, 1.25, and we are well above that as we're paying off debt and really moving to a cash basis for funding capital. So there's no issue there. I do want to bring up, it's something that Alicia and I talked a lot about this afternoon. So the legislature was really great to us in refunding, not refunding as in giving the money back, but finding other monies to provide us with $20 million for our water projects. I'm happy to report that one of the $1 million is going to the city of Turner for a pump station a water pump station that will help the city of Turner and will help the city of Salem in how we manage our water distribution coming outside of Franzen Reservoir. That we're not showing that in here because the way that money is coming to us is really to fund one project. So it's going to fund with the source of funds that's coming. It's going to fund the ASR plant, the treatment plant that we have to build at Woodminster Park, and it's going to fund a few additional wells so we can make better use of our aquifer storage and recovery. So because of that, let me go back a slide. It really, all of these monies here in rate funded capital are not impacted. That project, those, basically $19 million worth of projects is one project. So this will just fund more projects in the utility. As I said, the utility always needs, the capital needs are always there. So that one project is basically funded, taken out of the the CIP and other projects come in their place. So that's how that's being handled, and that's why it's not, that influx of money isn't shown here. All right, so if there aren't any questions, I'm a little past where I want it to be. I just want to go through the sample bills real quick, and then if there are any questions and stuff, we can just handle them in the discussions. So we prepare a bunch of sample bills because in the end, our utility finances are very complex, and the cost of service model is very complex. And just because we call it a revenue slope on purpose, because it actually affects customers slightly differently depending on how the cost of service model works. So I'm just going to go through these real quick. Those of you that have been here before have seen these. It's really the same examples with the new numbers, and then the newbies will kind of see these for the first time. So here's the average single family bill. So this is about 8 cubic feet of use for water, 100 cubic feet of wastewater, tier 2 stormwater. They'll see about a $3 a month increase in each of the 2 years, and the slight increase is the stormwater is affecting them, more heavily. And you'll see other customers where the stormwater actually affects them less. So here's a low user, and here's a high user. This is a big spread, big irrigator, creekside styled homes out here, and what they might be facing. Multifamily. So again, there's dozens of multifamily. So we always like to show a fourplex and what the impact is going to be for them. A large multifamily, and then a small, or a large multifamily and then a mobile home park, and what their increases are going to be. So commercial, there's a list of what the commercial customer class includes. And what we do is we just take 2 examples. At one point, these were real customers, and then we've just kind of kept them so that we have the same examples in terms of, the usage and the size of their parking lots. So you kind of see what a large equivalent dwelling unit. So this is how we charge for stormwater. So this is some kind of large retail perhaps, and this is a smaller commercial customer class, and what they're facing or what their impact will be. Industrial, so these are actually 2 industrial customers. So industrial is a little more complicated because for wastewater we charge not just by flow, but by biochemical oxygen demand. So the strength of the sewage and the suspended solids in the sewage. And then there's also a fixed cost because these customers have a federal permit that they have to abide by. And we have staff that go out and actually audit and enforce that permit and take samples. So that is based on cost of service that is charged to them here. And then you see the stormwater. And these customers tend to not have very big parking lots, and the charge for stormwater is actually you see the more just closer to 3% rate increase as compared to residential, because their sewage, their water and sewer charges are so high that the stormwater really just doesn't make much of a difference. So that's why you see those differences there. Institutional, so these are mostly the, as you could probably tell by the photograph, these are the prisons in town. And so what the state of Oregon Department of Corrections will be seeing. Public is a state, county, other buildings, and then the school districts and how it impacts them. So because there's no change in cost of service, it's pretty straightforward. When we have cost of service changes, then you see kind of these wild swings, beyond the rate proposal. Here you can see that they're all trending pretty close to just the 3%. Irrigation, so our friends at, there's a bunch of irrigation accounts, but the big account is Creekside. And you can see that it's just straight up 3%. Then a nice picture of City of Kaiser City Hall, Tim. So, and that's, since it's just sewer, no franchise fee, no nothing. So that's, it's just the straight up 3%. And then the city of Turner, what they'll see. And then Bruce, suburban East Salem, and then Orchard Heights out in West Salem. And what you'll see, so a little more than 3%. And what's acting here, and Deb is here. Deb produces these for us, our consultant. And what's acting here is just how some of the cost of service factors flow through depending on the size of the meters and those kinds of things. So that's why they tend to be a little more than the slope. And then Jan Ray, Yola, Chattanooga, and outside sewer, and what they'll see, and these are all pretty much straightforward, 3%. And then we are here. If we make a decision tonight, then we will flop over to this side. I will, what I typically do is let the rest of the counselors know where we're at. I like to meet with them ahead of time to see if there's any questions. Assuming there are no questions or concerns, we will send out our postcards. Around the 1st of September, we will populate the website. We have it on the fly sheet, on the council fly sheet for the public hearing October 12th, and then the rates will take effect next year. And so that is it for the presentation. Councilor Nanke, I can bring anything back up if the members need it, but the meeting is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Fernandez. Just a quick question, going back a couple of slides, but we don't need to go there on the presentation, regarding schools and what have you. Mm-hmm. Knowing that they haven't been having students at their locations, and kind of how that, as well as some of the institutional state office buildings, have we actually seen reductions, or do the homeowners now sit at home, or are they watering their yards more? Or kind of what's the deal with COVID land and how it's been affecting our water usage?
Yeah, so we get a report every month on water production, and for the water year, so for the first 3 months, I think water year started June 1st. We were seeing substantial decreases over the prior 3 years. This last month, when things finally got hot, we finally had the same amount of water used as the prior 2 years. But the earlier months, they were significantly less. Yeah, so we were seeing a reduction. Alicia, you want to touch on what our revenues have been looking like? Do you have that at your fingertips?
I don't have it at my fingertips, but in terms of modeling, we did make some more conservative assumptions. So we assumed that commercial and public were going to be down, the water use, and then the associated wastewater bases would be down into next year. And so, the longer this goes on, if we get into the sewer base setting time, we might need to reevaluate those assumptions, and that could change the picture for the future. But for right now, we've done some pretty conservative things in our modeling.
Excellent. Thanks, Alicia. Does anyone have any questions?
This is Bruce from East Salem Water District. If I could take a minute and ask about Peter's slides on our wholesale purchases.
Let me bring it back up, Bruce, so we can, if you want to refer to it.
There it is.
Oops, no, let me go back. Let me go back. That's the one you want to look at?
Yes, right there.
Go ahead.
So we're looking at 3.3 and 3.1.
Yes.
Okay. So 2 years ago, we were all in meeting to plan out 4 years of 7 point something rate increases out here for us. Remember that?
Yes.
Okay. So my question is we should be in the second 2 years of that 4-year plan. Is this 3.3% and 3.1% already figured into that 7 from before? Or is it on top of the 7 that we already have coming?
It's instead of the 7. So part of that, those extra 2 years was another part of the phasing of the COSA. And we made a decision administratively to just do a straight 3, 3, and 5 instead of try to continue that implementation to try to give a break to the wholesale customers for the years 3 and 4. So that needs to be addressed in the next rate setting cycle.
Okay, so for the last 2 years, we raised our rates to cover the 7.5 and 7.4%, I think, from before. But the next 2 years, we're not going to do that. We're just going to go straight back to the normal.
That's what we're proposing. We're proposing to leave it at 3 and 3 and then address it again in the following cycle.
Kind of for Bruce there. So the next rate setting cycle, what do their numbers kind of look like? Because they're trying to adjust their rates based on what they thought was going to be higher for 4 years, and it was only higher for 2 years, then they dropped. So will they be able to actually charge their customers less because of this reduction, or do they have to look forward to something that's going to happen 2 years from now?
Deb, do you have that information going out that far at your fingertips?
No, the COSA, looked at, it was a 2-year, and then we developed a transition over a 4-year period. But we have not, this is a non-COSA cycle, so we haven't projected beyond that, out beyond another 2 years. So in terms of the revenue,
undercharging their customers, and so that they have the visibility that we're trying to give to, all of our in-city customers as well. So it'd be nice if we could kind of look at what may happen to them 2 years from now, so at least they have a good impression of where it might be moving, since it's changed significantly from what they were trying to adjust their rates for.
Right. Yeah, and we can certainly do that.
Well, the proposed chart that you had up, the blue chart, it's projected out on the top, right? 3%.
Yes, but
basically.
Yes, but that does not include the, when we do cost of service updates, then that, it doesn't change the rate proposal. It doesn't change the rates, but it does change the way costs are allocated. Okay. And it's in the cost allocation that things can get a little squirrely in terms of, some people having to pay more and some people then getting some breaks. Because it's the same amount of money, but the costs are getting shifted.
So basically, from our wholesale point of view, we got 3.3 and 3.1. I can, at this point, prepare for that instead of what I prepared for already. I can change it. Okay.
That's correct.
Happy customers.
That's pretty good news.
Yeah.
Well, we thought it would be. We were hoping.
Yeah, I truly didn't expect it. I thought we were still on the 4-year thing, and now I'm seeing that it's gone back to basically what it used to be. So,
right, but probably better plan in years 3 and 4 that there might be higher, closer to that 7% to finish out that 4-year transition, because we're only halfway through the 4-year transition, like you said.
Which is why my comment was up earlier, because he needs to know whether or not he needs to still have a slight increase to cover a potential significant increase down the road, or if they basically dodged a big bullet here, so that they don't give false hope to people that, hey, we're in great land and hang a couple years down the road.
So I think what we want to do for you, Bruce, is give you, kind of look backwards and forwards, and then just give you kind of a sense of where it's going to be 2 years from now because of the COSA changes, and then you and your board can decide what you want to do.
Yeah, that'd be a good thing. Then I can decide whether to actually reduce rates for a couple of years or leave them and create a savings for when it does increase. It'll kind of create a cushion so it doesn't hurt.
Right, you can smooth that out a little bit. So we'll get you some additional information so that you have that, and then you and your board can make some decisions.
All right, that'd be great. Thank you.
Just the other piece involved with that, because this is public knowledge and people will see this, and if Bruce's customers say, well, geez, they're only raising our percent by 3.3, but yet they're nailing us for 7, what's going on with that? So we want to kind of make sure that they have information that they can provide to their customers to tell them why.
Certainly. Oops, you muted yourself, Brad.
I did. Any other questions?
Councilor Nanke, this is Ryan Mann. I had a comment.
Sure.
Well, and first I just want to note I also have to hop off at 7:30, so I apologize if I missed the very end of this. I'll try to stay on for a couple minutes extra. I just wanted to preface my comment just with the fact that this is informed by a couple primary ideas. One is folks may remember from last time around 2 years ago, and maybe even from the last meeting, that I'm big on reserves, and I even advocated for slightly higher rate increases 2 years ago, just purely because I like to see bigger reserves, not knowing what's coming down the pike. So just throwing that out there, that's part of what I bring to this. And then the other thing I'm bringing to this that isn't news to anybody is just acknowledging the unpredictability of our current times, and how hard it is to know how long we'll be dealing with this pandemic and the economic impact. And some folks think I'm pessimistic, but I've been sort of erring on the side that we might be dealing with this for longer than a lot of us would like, and try to approach some of these decisions with that in mind. So just throwing those two things out there for full disclosure. So when I see including the recommendation that this is necessary for this is sort of the minimum possible to maintain our requirements, it makes me a little bit nervous. And then the slide, Peter, you shared with I really appreciate your director recommendation around the $10 million. And so when I see the nearly zeroed out in the 22 to 24 timeframe, it makes me nervous. And I know about our aging infrastructure and various threats out there. So that's all making me a little uneasy. And then the deferred revenue piece, I appreciate how hard it is to make assumptions about when some of that will be collected. But when I see the assumption that, and correct me if I read this wrong, but it sounded like the assumption is that will be collected in the next 2 years as part of revenue expectations. And if we're dealing with this for longer and there's the same level or greater sort of economic struggles, we may see more people struggling to make those payments. We may see slightly less revenue than we're anticipating. So to sort of be a broken record from 2 years ago, I would again say that, and it was easier to say 2 years ago when generally the economic situation was good, and I felt comfortable saying, I think we can all afford to pay a little bit more. And I fully appreciate that is not as easy of an argument to make now. But I would still say some of us who can afford to pay maybe should pay a little bit more, understanding that some folks who can't afford to pay aren't, we're not going to see revenue from them. So I know that this probably isn't prepared for this meeting, but if there were scenarios on what a 3.5 and 5.5 looked like, or I'd be interested in that, just knowing what it would do for our reserves. So again, this isn't because I want everyone to be paying more in water bills. It's just knowing that there's a lot of uncertainty in the years ahead, and the more reserves we can have, the better position we'll be to deal with it, and the less likely we'll be to have to see one of those really big rate increases. So I don't have a specific proposal in mind. I just, I would prefer to see above the minimum possible, knowing it could leave us in a bad spot. So I don't want to prolong the deliberations, but that I'm a little uneasy with this recommendation.
Thank you, Ryan. And a question kind of in that vein then, because when I saw the 0.5 rather than 10 million, it gave me a pause for concern as well. But in the event something critical would happen, we have a 120-day reserve goal as well. Is that mandated, or would that be the essential equivalent of a reserve potential as well in the event of significant catastrophes or what have you?
Yeah, I mean, those monies are there I'm sorry. Got to stop hitting buttons here. Everybody can see the financial plan summary table, right?
Yep.
Okay. So those reserves are there really for a catastrophe. So that is, you know, what this unrestricted fund balance allows us to do is, you know, we would call on these monies first, you know, so that we wouldn't be touching the operating reserve and the debt service reserve. But in the case of an unmitigated disaster, hey, the $50 million are there, and we would go to council and tap them. And I certainly appreciate Ryan Mann's comments. How can I argue, you know, a man you know, who's after my own heart, saying, hey, you know, more reserves. I mean, that's, you know, I love saving, but we've had a lot of conversations. You know, we have a lot of capital needs, and sort of the, not debates, but sort of the conversations are, you know, if we have these needs and we have to get them done, you know, at some point, what are we hanging on for? You know, we can make it back up. We run a risk here, you know, so I'm hard pressed to argue with Ryan, but we have so many things that we got to do. So then it really just becomes the question of, well, do we propose a higher rate? You know, I hate to argue with a task force member that is proposing a higher rate. I mean, my God, thank you. But you know, we're just trying to find that balance. We're just trying to find that balance. And the way to address this would be, well, would we look at our rate funded capital? You know, like right here, we really kind of hit for the fences. You know, would we just back up on some of these projects and just say, you know, let's back up a little bit. Let's put some more cash in place. And that's really where the internal conversation is. You know, do we go ahead and fund a bunch of projects, or do we hold back a little bit and put some more money in the bank?
Peter, I might add too that it is included in our master bond declaration and in our council policy on managing the fund.
At what?
120-day operating.
The 120 day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and basically, if in fact there were an emergency, there's funding that could be utilized to deal with that in response to the concern that, you know, the monies that we'd like to have for emergencies, we could make our way through that without having to actually build reserves, knowing that, you know, unrestricted fund balance out, you know, 5 years from now will be significant because our debt service is down, and then we'll be balancing that again, and we'll be looking at that on a 2-year basis as well. So it's not that we're at an increased sense of risk or potential risk in the event something happens within the next 2 years, knowing that, again, with COVID interacting with our economy and our residents, we need to find that balance to where we don't hit people who are down on their luck right now with a significantly higher rate as well.
Right. Right. And I was, frankly, I was, not that there was any conversation, but the fact that the council decided to move ahead with invoicing for the money that's owed on the deferred amounts. So that, and I'll tell you that the latest report is that we're now over $800,000 in deferred. So the fact that we'll start billing for that, you know, at the first of the year, and my expectation would be that we'll probably get most of that back over the next year. It'll be interesting to see if people can keep up with the payments. And my my gut tells me that most people can pay it. We've just had, there are some people that are in need and some people will struggle. My guess is most customers will be able to pay it.
All right. Any other questions? Councilor Kaiser.
Thanks. I know that council's going to be taking this up here in the next couple of months. I'd be really curious other task members' thoughts, because I think councilors will get a chance to talk about this, but not necessarily the task force members. So I would really like to hear from others on the task force their thoughts about the proposal.
This is Laura Tesler. I think it's a good proposal. Seen a few of them myself. I was in one of the 0 years. That was always a great year.
Wasn't that a fun year?
Wasn't it a fun year, neighbor? Wasn't it? But anyway, a couple of thoughts. Mr. Truitt has some very perceptive things, and I'm just going to tell you, Oregon State Parks thought that they had a real big reserve too, and they burnt through their cash reserve in about 6 months, and they have had to really make some drastic cuts to their agency, and 75% of their workforce is not going to be returning. So beware of being confident of having a lot of cash reserves if something goes terribly wrong, because they found out. And when you have to operate a whole agency on cash reserves, your money is going to burn away like gas in a big fire. So seeing that happen to Oregon State Parks is a pretty somber lesson. The second thing that I always say that Peter has to hear me say yet again for probably the third or fourth time is, I work with a lot of other municipalities, and they do something which I think is very smart. And what they do is they buy their watershed. And if we ever have the possibility to purchase property in our watershed and acquire property and buy parts of our municipal watershed, we should do that. And that's a sound investment into the future. The Dalles is a good example of a municipality that bought their entire watershed. Reedsport is another example. There's a couple other cities. LeGrand, I think, owns part of their municipal watershed. It's a very, very smart thing to do, to buy pieces of the watershed as they become available. I think that's really going to help with water quality. It's a good thing to do, to strategically think about that in the future. If we do have some cash reserves, and if the municipality can afford it, it's just a good investment in water quality overall, because it's the best filter you could ever have for water is to own your own watershed. So, and to always invest into things like, these are kind of a dream list. This is my third part, is that if the municipality could ever get it together to the point where we could provide grants to for pervious pavement, or for people to do more, curb cuts and rain gardens. And I know we've made great strides in this area from the time that, I was on council back in the ancient years, but just to keep working with developers and, keep expanding people's knowledge and, reducing stormwater and runoff, and, working with people in those areas. And I know that we've made great knowledge on that. So just really, commend Peter and the gang for that. We've come just miles and miles. So, and that's it. Thank you, Brad.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Laura. And it's great to hear your voice again. I've missed it. Any other questions?
Yeah, this is Dave Sawyer from Turner, just responding to Kara's elicitation of other comments. So I've served on the task force for about a decade now, and I have probably dived into the data more than most. I found it to be very good. The work that Alicia did in the last day addressing the 2,000 customer change changed my perspective, because I thought that you'd seen so much growth in 1 year that you shouldn't be asking for so much of a rate increase. So I say that recognizing that I really respect the staff work behind the proposal. I know that it's not full of fluff, that it's based in really good data. On the other side, I would say that in these times, we all have to share the pain to some degree. I would never support trying to increase more fund balances at a time when everybody's bank accounts are going down. And I know for us in the city of Turner, we're going to be repealing a resolution we passed 4 months ago to increase a police fee because we've found a creative way to try and solve that problem. We think we can get through that for the next year. We'll probably be back, as we always are as cities, for needing more money, but we're trying to be prudent and based in real good data. And that's what I see this proposal being based in. It's not a political sort of, swab to make sure everybody's happy, but at the same time, it supports the utility, but does it in a fair way. So.
Thank you, David. Anyone else? Seeing.
Yeah, this is Jordan with the chamber. Yeah, I'm curious, is there, I guess, a little bit of background as to how we came to, not we, but the task force came to the 5% increase for stormwater. Our business has long been susceptible to stormwater and runoff. We have a lot of pavement. We have a lot of roof structure. We have a lot of gutter and drainage. We also had a lot of byproduct from food production that was treated, at our own expense before it's returned to the city. How did the 5% come to be at that figure? Yep. And has there been any discussion precluding my participation to tier some of the rate structure instead of jumping straight to 5%? If it was an annual increase of 0.5% each year up to a desired point to try to ease that burden. I know we were, oh gosh, at our height, I think we were going through about 2 million gallons of city water a day during the height of canning and using a massive amount of water. And so that an increase of even 0.5% in a 1 month time frame for a lot of our industrial people could, have a dramatic impact, especially for something like food production, which is extremely low margin to begin with. So,
Jordan and Peter will take that. But
yeah, and I'm going to do a super quick
manufacturing, and we had the same issues. So
yeah, super quick. So Jordan, prior to 2012 to 2013, sewer and storm were combined. So you would get, in your bill. Storm was sort of embedded in your sewer bill. Storm was sort of embedded in it. And for many years, in fact, Mr. Malden had attempted to do a stormwater utility back in the late 80s. And we were kind of late to the stormwater game. But what we found is it was one thing when stormwater was 5, 6, 7% of the overall sewer charges or sewer costs. We were to a point in the early 2000s where we were up to like 30, 35%. And the people that were getting hammered were food processors, because you guys are paying, the biggest in wastewater, the largest amounts, and the sewer was, and yet your stormwater is very low because you have, not so much Truett Brothers because you have a lot of asphalt, but when you go out into like Oregon Fruit and NORPAC and some others have a lot of grass around them. So we implemented the stormwater utility. The council approved it in 2013. So that's when you start to see it here first. And when we implemented it, the food processors saw an immediate reduction in their significant reduction in their wastewater charges because stormwater was pulled out. And that was really a very small percentage of what your costs should be. What happens though, because it was a great thing for food processors, it was horrible for commercial. So you think of Walmart, you think of a large church, car dealerships. They have 3 toilets, substantial amounts of parking lot of impermeable. So really food processing was subsidizing this sort of big asphalt, big box commercial. So the council implemented it in 4 years. It was a very slow phase in. So we implemented it over 4 years, as you see here. And then when we got out here to the cost of service, that we do every 4 years, once it was fully implemented, we realized that we really weren't charging enough. That wastewater was still subsidizing. Well, now water and wastewater are subsidizing stormwater. So what you're seeing here is this was part of the cost of service update. And because it's such an increase, we always want to phase these things in. So that's been kind of a hallmark of the city of Salem and of the utility. I've been here 25 years. We've been doing these kinds of phase-ins for as long as I've been here, maybe longer. So what you see here is a phase-in to bring stormwater in line with its costs and actually not have sewer and water subsidizing those costs. So that's why you see there. As a food processor, though, this should not be impacting you a whole lot. It's really these rates are really, and mostly sewer are what really, is where you see your biggest impact. So when you saw the sample bills for industrial, you really see that storm is really not very, very much. It's the 3% on a pretty substantial base. So that's why we always like to have food processors on the task force, because you guys are a big customer. So we need to hear from you. But that's the short history of stormwater.
Okay. Yeah, I think about it as my auto dealership friends. They've got asphalt for days and they're putting more and more asphalt in every day. And I imagine they're getting hit pretty hard. And with the recent adaptation to that for the stormwater runoff, we had to implement new procedures and diagrams and mappings and routes of our stormwater, its runoffs, its drains, where it goes to the river, have those tested, collected, dropped off, analyzed, make remediation steps. And that in turn did cost us and other people money, although the stormwater is not nearly as expensive as the water coming in and water going out. Yeah. But wanted to get a little brief history on that, so thank you.
Yeah, and the ramp up in stormwater, we have tried to hold back as much as we can, but the DEQ, the EPA, the federal government, and the state government are really ramping up the stormwater requirements, and we just have to, provide that. So we, and require those things. And there has been a significant ramp up. In fact, I was always worried that they were going to ramp it up when we were still $300 million in debt. I was deathly afraid that, the feds and the state were going to show up and say, now you got to do stormwater. And I was going to say, my God, we're bankrupt. We can't do it. So the fact that it's ramped up slower has actually helped us. But I hear you that it is becoming a bigger and bigger cost.
Definitely.
Okay, so,
we've been seeing the
sorry,
Fed
go ahead, Brad.
moving in that direction for a long time. And again, it's nice that they moved a little slower, but we've been well aware of that, which is also part of the why we opted for that term of 5% increases as well to cover increases required by the federal government.
Well, creating the utility. I mean, we just couldn't wait any longer. So.
Yeah, and one obvious point that we see in the Salem landscape is food processors are fewer and fewer, and the AgriPack and Chiquita and we're down to just a couple left, and we have since closed operations, and so that becomes a burdensome. It could be a bit of an eyesore on a statement. Oh, they're going up 5% for stormwater, and I think your average user might see that as well. But it's unlikely to help attract new industrial users. But some of these industrial facilities will get repurposed into multifamily developments, et cetera. So I'm kind of viewing this, trying to view this through as many lenses as possible.
Jordan, was David your uncle?
David was my uncle, yes.
Yeah, so David served on the Water Wastewater Task Force for many, many, many years. In fact, he was a founding member, and he must have trained you well, because we heard he said the very same things year in and year out, and we take that very seriously. Don't tell my dad that. We understand that.
Yeah, don't tell my dad I sound like his brother, all right?
Well, he was a great person. We're really sorry to, when he passed away in such an untimely way. He was really a great guy.
Real loss, but I'm reminded of him almost every day. So it's, glad to have his direction.
All right. Any other questions before we start losing members? I see that Councilor Kaiser has dropped out. If there's no further discussion, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Staff recommendation coming from former Councilor Laura Tesler, seconded by David Sawyer. Further discussion? You want to speak your motion, Councilor Tesler?
I'd just like to again say that, as a residential customer, I appreciate not having to subsidize stormwater. I just do. And I also would like to say that I want to again commend Alicia, who for many years has cranked out the numbers. Alicia, you should either work for a multinational money ranking or something, because you're just wonderful. And the rest of the public works staff just do a wonderful job. So thank you so much for doing this.
Laura. Any
Yes.
other discussion?
Please know how much we appreciate the work of our consultant, Deb Gallardi, as well.
Oh, yeah, it's great.
Deb's been great for many, many years.
And I miss the great food you used to feed us too, darn it.
We'll be back. We'll be back. It's the least we can do.
You don't feed us anything over Zoom, man.
I know. I'm sorry.
When they feed us at the meeting, it'd have to be a 4% rate increase.
There you go. And then it'll only be to the outlying districts, not City of Salem residents. Okay, we do have an active motion on the floor. Any further discussion?
Can I interrupt just 1 second?
Sure.
I believe my counterpart, Chris, is having some microphone issues. So I just want to make sure that everybody's good and there's not anything else that needs to come up. So concerning his perspective. It doesn't sound like it. So I just wanted to get that in there real quick to make sure that his voice was good. So
yeah, thank you. Okay.
So with that, do we want to do a roll call vote for?
I don't think I think if everybody has a thumbs up, I mean, if anybody wants to not vote for it, I guess we'd want to hear from them. Otherwise, so we can say it's unanimous or not unanimous.
Sure. Okay. I'll just call for an oral vote. And if we hear any nays, we can go from there. So all those in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye or thumbing up. Aye. All those opposed, and I'll give you time to unmute if you so choose.
This is Ryan. I'm going to be a no just because it's going to pass, and I just so that my points can be made at the council. It's with absolute respect to the staff and the work and the difficult spot that we're all in. So it's more of a symbolic no to say I'm worried about our sort of long-term reserves, but appreciate everyone's perspective and the staff.
Excellent. I'm a single no vote at a lot of times.
That's the kind of no vote I like to hear, though, Ryan. Thank you.
That's right. So based on the vote, the motion would pass. Is there anything else staff would need of us for this evening?
We are done. In fact, not just for this evening. We are done for the next 2 years, and I want to say again how much I appreciate everyone's help. This is really an important process, and to get the feedback so we appreciate it to be able to go through and be able to then show the council that we've had this process and that it's been reviewed by counselors, by customers, by citizens. So thank you. Thank you. I miss you. We'll see you in 2 years.
Thank you, Peter. And this has always been a great task force. I was tracking it before I could actually be on because my boss was on it in my early days of council, so that I couldn't necessarily because there was a conflict.
That's right. And Brad Nanke, retiring from the council, done an excellent job. Thank you so much for chairing us for so many years. I really appreciate it.
All right. If there's nothing else, you can push that little red button in the bottom unless our host pushes the button first.
Okay,
Thank you all.